What's up guys, first post of 2021, so happy new year, and today I'm going to be reviewing the final season of Vikings. Just watched the final 2 episodes, so thought I'd start filming this while my mind is fresh. It's a very average season with some very high quality episodes, I think is my overall feeling, and I think from what I've seen of other fan reactions, this is a very shared experience. Episode 11, which, spoiler alert, saw the death of Bjorn Ironside, was incredible. Then the final run of episodes when Ivar went back to England to fight Alfred and Uber reached the Golden Land. They were also very engaging, very compelling, and a very epic way to send off the series. But the 6 episodes in between that felt very stalled and very just mediocre for a final season, which was slightly disappointing. I know a lot of people saw the decline in Vikings in season 5 after Ragnar's death, and yep, I would agree with that, but I also felt like the story was at least strong. I thought the fracturing of the Ragnarsons was quite well handled, and the rise of King Alfred and the whole Wessex storyline there was really compelling. I loved Aethelwulf, loved Hickman, and as I said, loved Alfred, so I thought that was anchored in some really strong characters. Uber sort of coming into his own, going off and realising Ragnar's dreams at the end of season 5 was really strong. So while it may have lacked the oomph of having someone as charismatic as Travis Fimmel there to play Ragnar, I also felt that it didn't completely ruin the show. Season 6A, however, I think it just didn't know what it wanted to do. That whole season was very much a setup, and they tried to make it engaging with its own little political plot in Russia, but I found season 6A very, very weak, and I was quite worried coming into season 6B with whether they'd have enough time to revive the show and go out on an ultimate high. And it's quite 50-50. I think a lot of people are torn. I want to start by talking about the characters, and Bjorn was fatally wounded coming into this season. I think we all knew realistically he wasn't going to last that long, and I loved the way they handled Bjorn's death. I think it gave episode 11 a real kind of momentum and jettisoned this final season off to a great start, and also showed that anyone can drop out at any time, and it kind of cleared the way narratively for the focus to then be on Uber, Fitzurk and Ivar going into that last run of episodes. And Bjorn's death was arguably the most epic death of the show. Ragnar's obviously being the most emotional, and then Ivar's at the end I felt was probably the most human, the most real death that I think the show's done. But what I loved about Bjorn's death was that it felt like a combination of other deaths. It was the enemy believing Bjorn had already died, so it kind of imitated Ragnar's going into Paris at the end of season 3 in a coffin, so it was like this rebirth for Bjorn in his final moments. And also the just getting impaled with arrows felt very reminiscent of Torsten's death back in season 3, episode 3. Uber has probably been my favourite son of Ragnar throughout this show, and I think once they reach the Promised Land in episode 18, that storyline really finds its footing. Everything in between, much like season 6A, it just felt like it didn't know what to do with Uber. And so while season 6B makes some effort to get him off on his voyage, we do spend about 4 or 5 episodes with them just floating around in the sea. Ultimately, in a final season, just spending that much time aimlessly floating about just didn't feel like the best use of screen time. And with that in mind, let us get to what is probably my biggest criticism of this season, which is Ingrid and Eric and the whole Kattegat storyline. Just every time they came on screen this season, I thought, why? Why, Michael Hurst, are we going back to these characters? Ingrid was introduced in season 6A, and here she's just presented as a witch who has her own ambitions to rule, because apparently everyone has ambitions to rule in this show. Same with Eric. I really liked Eric in season 6A, that kind of outlaw figure who comes in, saves Bjorn's life, quite a badass on the battlefield, and here he's relegated to a power-hungry moron. And frankly, that storyline should have been either cut short, wrapped up in episode 15, back when Gunhild dies, or just cuts, because, you know, I know Kattegat has been the heart of the show for a while. It's where, you know, it found its roots, but for the sake of the grandeur and the scale and the kind of priorities of this season, I don't know why in God's name we spent that much time with those characters. So yes, that was, in terms of pacing, I think they brought every episode down. Ultimately, we should have got to England a lot sooner than we did. You know, episode 17 felt like a real revival in terms of energy, and that was purely because we got King Alfred and Wessex back. You know, England became a part of the show again. And when you think about how present England and the English crown and Christianity has been throughout the show, that's been at the forefront of the show for its entirety. And then for season 6 to just dismiss that entire storyline after it had reached such a engaging peak in season 5 with King Alfred finally maturing as a king, leading his men into battle, I felt a huge sigh of relief when we did get him back on screen, but also a sense of, Christ, we've only got 4 episodes left. Can they make the most of that? I really don't think we got enough of King Alfred in season 6. But what we did, I can't fault. You know, the show is still at its best with battles, choreography, the production design, the cinematography is still at a standard that I love. Vikings does battle scenes better than any show on television, and I'm so thankful that we got 2 battles, one in episode 19 and then a sort of culmination in episode 20. And I really also liked how they didn't go super big with those battles. It sort of honed in on Ivar and Alfred, their spiritual conflicts, this rivalry and this sense of legacy that haunts both of them. The way that the final battle was staged, with them both having these moments of fear, like, are the gods here? Have they abandoned us? And then ultimately Ivar accepting his fate and dying there on the battlefield. It felt very moving, and the way that Alfred stopped the battle once Ivar had gone down was really respectable. I wish the whole season had been devoted to that and building that up, because what I didn't like was how Ivar just suddenly had this epiphany of like, oh, I'm bored, what do I do next? Oh, let's go raid England again. It felt very much like that. It wasn't this, my whole destiny has been leading up to this, you know, conclusive battle with the Christ God and the English crown. After humanizing Ivar for the first 15 episodes of season 6, the sudden regression back into psycho Ivar, let's go conquer, rule, dominate, it felt too sudden. It wasn't as dramatic as, you know, Daenerys in the Bells episode of Game of Thrones, but it was a bit more like, oh, could we have just had a little bit longer to emphasize that switch? But, you know, that's enough of me complaining. I want to focus on the positives, because there were a lot of positives in this season. Harold, I love. I think Harold has been the underlying MVP of this show. He's been the number one actual Viking. Loved his just attitude. And I think this season as well, he really evolved. His death was a very intimate moment where he saw his brother Halfdan came back in a little cameo. Why couldn't we have got Ragnar back in a little cameo? I don't know. I think it's kind of fitting that Harold died in episode 19 rather than episode 20, because not only would it have maybe detracted from Ivar's death having the spotlight, but I also think Harold over the whole course of the show has always fallen short, whether that's in not being able to marry the women of his dreams, or, you know, not having these epic victories and only becoming king of all Norway through, you know, scheming and manipulation. So for him to die just short of the finale felt kind of true to his character's slight misfortune over the course of this show. Uber reaching the Golden Land, deciding to settle it and abandon the old ways. Really loved it. And obviously Floki's return, which we all know was coming. It was beautiful to see him again. I think they handled it beautifully, and that ending scene of the whole show, in fact, with Uber and Floki just sat on the beach, talking about Ragnar, the old times, and also Floki just living in the moment and accepting the world, the physical, tangible world, and not focusing too much on the gods anymore was a huge development for his character when you think about him being this very devout, willing to kill Athelstan for the gods and do everything for the gods in the early seasons, to now being this guy who's shed all that and just lives in the present moment with his surroundings, was very poetic, I felt. A very quiet way to end, but also very true, I think, to the show. And I know that everyone wanted it to end with this scene in Valhalla with everyone, but this show has always thrived in the subtleties of spirituality and religion. It's never committed to either. And so to show us Valhalla with all these dead characters would be false and would feel very superficial, because everyone seems to forget that Ragnar at the end of his life had accepted that for him, man is the master of his own fate. He'd forsaken the gods, and the whole speech before his death, that was all a performance for him. He sort of said to Ekber,
I'll talk about the gods, about my joy of entering Valhalla. Even though you don't believe it.
So he shouldn't be in Valhalla. That would completely reverse the point that Ragnar reached leading up to his death. I don't think it's detriment to the show that Ragnar didn't come back. I was kind of hoping for a bit more of Rollo. I'm not sure how he would have fit into the story. I just don't think the way he came in for an episode in season 5, I don't think that really did him justice. And I think I would rather have had his farewell been in that episode in season 4 after their raiding, like as a little tribute to his time as a Viking, but ultimately having to leave that life behind was probably a better service to him than, yo Bjorn, I'm your dad. No, you're not. I'll leave again. Other things that they did really well. I loved the scene between Uber and Oter on the ship, where Oter is praying to the Christian gods, and Uber starts singing that, that My Mother Told Me. It's become a bit of a motif on this show. It's what Halfdan and Harold sung. And I loved the subtle hints that the kind of Christian ways and Nordic ways were starting to align, because there were several moments early in the season where I thought, right, Christianity and the Norse gods are starting to blur into one. Olaf in the moments before his death suddenly did the Christian prayer. Ivar escaping Kiev with Igor. Obviously we had the Christian martyr who actually led their cart away and distracted Oleg. And also, again, on the ship to the Promised Land, we had Oter as a Christian and Uber, and that alignment of these two different cultures. And I think that was deliberate and indicative of the fact that we're moving towards a time when a lot of Scandinavia becomes converted into Christianity. That is a historical fact. So Michael Hirst was teasing that little conversion there, which I really found effective. But yeah, that's it for Vikings. Was very happy with the final couple of episodes, and some other episodes throughout the show. Definitely had its moments in this final season. Vikings stayed very true to its roots and made some very strong character decisions, while focusing maybe a bit too much on characters who we didn't really care about. And I think it's going to be great to rewatch it, pick up on new, spiritual ideas and philosophies. I feel somewhat empty now that Vikings is over, because it's one of those shows that came out, with Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Sons of Anarchy for me, I was watching at the time, and it's the one that's finished last. It's been the OG for me that's carried on, and so it's the end of an era, and quite happy with how it went out. Definitely not overwhelmed with, yes, couldn't have gone out a better way, but very happy for sure. So would love to know what anyone else thinks in comments. But yeah, I will see you soon.